Good morning, good morning, good morning. I want to welcome everybody to the March Book Club, where our book this month is Delilah Dirk and the King Shilling by Tony Cliff. Hello, who's right here. I'm Brian Hibbs, your host.
I'm Ben Hibbs, your co-host.
Your co-host. And thanks. Especially thank all of you for coming out. It's a rainy day here in San Francisco, so and it's daylight savings time, which throws everybody off. So it's especially nice to have everybody come out this morning because show up. So yeah, great book. You guys like the book? Yeah, you like this?
Yeah.
Let's hear it. Come on.
Yeah.
There you go. All right. We're good. Yeah, I think this is just a terrific book. I think that it's action packed. It's a lot of fun. It's got some great history in it, and boy, can you draw! You have a very fine and beautiful line.
That is very kind of you to say.
Yeah. So I understand you have a small presentation kind of thing you'd like to share with us.
I can do a presentation. Yes. I can take you guys a bit through the process of making this. Are any of you guys interested in maybe making comics? Maybe you make comics already?
Yeah.
Sort of? A little bit?
This is getting more interesting.
That's good.
So, yeah, so I'll take you guys through a little bit of the process. I keep one of these on me all the time. It's just a little cheap, like $3 sketchbook. If you are a person who is interested in writing or comics, or it doesn't even matter, it could be music or making plays or making anything, I always try and keep something cheap on you that you can make notes in or like put ideas down, because there are two really important things. It's important that it's cheap, and it's important that you put your ideas down. Okay, so second point first. The importance of getting your ideas out of your head and putting them down on paper is that you have to make room for more. And I learned this from Scott Adams, the creator of Dilbert, in one of his process books. And say what you will about Dilbert or Scott Adams, this is a point that stuck with me for a long time. It's that if you think about ideas, like creative ideas, as little like dust motes, sort of, you know, they'll pop up in your head and and if you don't get them out, it'll just fill up the space, and then new ones won't come in.
Sure.
So the process of getting rid of something, like sweeping those dust motes out, is like putting it down on paper. Now, so you're making more room in your head to be creative and thoughtful and that sort of thing. And then the first point towards it being cheap is like art companies, you know, guys who make fancy books, guys who make fancy pencils want to tell you to buy the most expensive stuff because you're not a professional unless you have the most expensive stuff. But that's not true. And it's important that it's really cheap. It's important that you get like a little big mechanical pencil and like a ream of 500 sheets of Xerox paper. This is the best stuff to work on, because then it means it's not precious. And being precious about it is the thing that'll kill your creativity. If you have to think, if you have a fancy sketchbook, if you have like an $80 sketchbook and each one of those pages costs $1, then all of a sudden there's this block in your brain that says, I can't put an idea down here unless it is at least $1's worth of idea, right? So the cheaper your stuff is, the more you don't worry about that at all. And maybe you don't worry about that. Maybe you guys are completely unself-conscious. That's fine. I'm very self-conscious. So the cheaper my stuff is, the easier it is for me to get over that hurdle and be able to just put it all down, get it all out. So I would encourage you guys to, I don't know, that's the strategy that works for me. So this is my cheap sketchbook here. And it has, I just make, like, I've been told by people that this is a very orderly sketchbook. This is all very clean. But what these are here are just point form notes for Delilah Dirk 3, so the one that'll come up after that. And it's just like the sort of thing where you get up in the morning, you can take it if you want. No. Well, I can't read that either. That's okay. Maybe he doesn't necessarily have a shady past, but he totally exaggerates his achievements, overemphasizes their value. Okay, so I can't read it. And so none of this is in order. None of this is a story yet. There aren't any drawings in here yet. These are all just story ideas that pop up, and they all come out disordered, like a bunch of gumballs spilled all over the floor. So once I've got a book full of that, or once I feel like I have enough of these notes, you know, when they take the form of like just point forms and like dividing things into sections and figuring out what's important, 1, 2, 3. Once we've got a bunch of that, then I take it over to the computer and start typing it up and making. All right. Typing it up like a novel, basically.
So those are your notes just transcribed, or are you organizing them at that point?
At this point, what you're looking at here is it's starting to come into shape as a story. So it's all it's taking all the disordered notes, it's taking all the gumballs scattered on the floor and lining them up, you know, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, in order to try and make a sensible story out of it. Sometimes putting the red at the end. So at this point, my process, and this is something. So I studied animation. I went to school after high school. I went to post-secondary to study animation, to be an animator, traditional 2D animation. And one of the things they teach you, they emphasize, is that you want to animate your whole scene first with just rudimentary, like, stick figures, basically. You could, like, when you're drawing a character like Mickey Mouse, he's got big floppy ears, he's got long arms, but you add that stuff last, because if you draw all the little details, it's easy to get distracted by them. Whereas if you go in and just do like the really basic shapes all the way through, you can see how this scene is moving completely. Like, it's very rough, but then you're the artist and you know, oh, I'm going to add in ears here later, I'm going to add in arms later. But you got that face there, and you just move through the whole thing. You can see the whole thing at once. And that's sort of the process I use here. So first I write out the whole thing as basically a novel. Some people use scripts. I do this sort of novel thing. It works for me because I'm going to be drawing it, so I don't have to give myself any. I don't have to worry about somebody misunderstanding what I'm doing. So the whole thing, yeah.
I think one of the things that we see that are overdoing a number of these, excuse me, is that everybody really does a different process, a very different process, and whatever works for you is the best process.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, one of the red flags that I've discovered in my time working in animation and comics is if anybody shows up and tells you, I know the one way, I know the one singular way to do X, you know, to do something. Be wary of any advice that person gives you, because there's always a different way. There's a different way to get published. There's a different way to get people to see your comic. There's a different way to color your comic. All that stuff. There's so many different ways. Which is why also, if you guys want to tackle a creative project, I advise you to start small. Because, like, I meet some people who say, oh, I want to make a 600-page graphic novel. But that's really long. And if you're just starting out, if you're just figuring out how you do all this stuff, it's going to be much more difficult. Whereas if you if you want to be pursuing a creative project and you start small, like with maybe a 12-page comic, a 20-page comic, you can get the whole thing done pretty quickly, and then you've finished it. And there's a value to finishing a project that is hard to put into words. It's hard to fully appreciate how important that is until you've actually done it. Because then you know, I know how to get to the end of this thing. And then you can take all of the stuff you learned in that small project and expand it to a big project. And then also you can, instead of being an aspiring comic maker, you can be a comic maker because you finished one. You've made a comic. You're not aspiring. So the whole thing is written out in sort of novel form, and then the whole thing gets written out in thumbnails. Sorry.
Oh, please.
And
Put around it all?
I absolutely can, yeah.
Okay.
So what you're looking at here is these are 11 by 17 sheets of basically Xerox paper. And with what do you call it? 1 inch by 1.5 inch drawings representing each 2-page spread in the book. And here I'm mostly concerned about the beats and the timing. And you know, when you turn the page over, boom, there's a surprise there. Or you don't have something explode on the second page. You have something explode when you turn the page over, so it pops out. Because that's the only time when you're making a comic that you have an opportunity to surprise somebody like that. So the whole comic gets made like this, and then you can sort of review it and take a look at it and see how it's all come together. Here are more thumbnails. All the characters are just stick figures and circles and blobs. And then that gets a little bit larger. So these are rough pages, and there are 1, 2, 8 per 11 by 17 here. And now I'm starting to like do the expressions on the faces. I'm writing in all the dialogue. And so the whole graphic novel, all 266 pages, gets done like this. And once that's done, that means I have something that I can take to my editor and to my friends and the people I trust. I have something to take to them and say, this is what my graphic novel is going to be like. And then I can get their feedback. Because one of the other really difficult things about making a very long graphic novel is that it takes so long. If you wait until it's all done, you can't get that feedback. And it's really, really important to get other people's opinions, especially if you trust them. Sometimes, I mean, you'll learn this. You'll learn how to be selective about the feedback that you take and everything. But like if you're a comedian or if you're a musician, you can write a song or you can compose a joke. And you can take it up on stage that night and see and find out, oh, my joke is funny, or oh, my music, this song I just wrote, the crowd loved it. But with comics, you have to wait 1.5 years or 2 years to find out how people feel about it. But this way, if you do everything rough and then show it to someone you trust, you can get that feedback much earlier, and then you can sort of change and take people's ideas into consideration. But then from there, those all get scanned in and tweaked and then printed out, and we end up with what you can see here if you look very closely are some fine blue lines that are the enlarged rough, and then the black here, the dark part that most of you can see. That is the final pencil line. And so that's basic. I mean, here, let's go back here. I'm going to pass this around. So, and welcome to take a look at that. Like,
So you're going through and you're drawing the book essentially 3 different times, you're saying?
basically, yes.
Wow.
Wow. Well, I mean, the early parts are very quick. Sure. But yeah, no, it's too important to be able to get the long view of the thing to not do it that way.
Mm-hmm.
So for me,
Sure.
you know, like we said, there's a billion ways to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, in every way's right. I mean, and that's the thing that, you know, whenever you're doing anything creative, I always think, you know, never get discouraged and always do what feels right to you, and that's how you're gonna make your best work.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially in comics, where it's much more flexible than a more rigid profession or pursuit like animation.
You want to talk a little maybe about the differences between animation and doing comics?
It is a lot easier to talk about the similarities.
Okay.
Because there are, I don't know if being an animator makes it easier to be a comic maker, but I feel like my approach to animation is basically the same as the comic. I mean, all of the drawing skills are transferable. If you study animation, they'll make you do a lot of life drawing. Animation, of course, I mean, so I'll back up a little bit. In animation school, they focus on a couple things, which are all really, really important fundamentals. There's proportion and anatomy, so drawing human. There's perspective, so being able to represent a 3D space or a landscape or a room on a 2D page, that sort of thing. Composition, like composing things in animation. That's composing things within that rectangle, that TV rectangle type thing. And in comics, it's arranging your elements on that 2-page spread, or if you're doing digital comics for whatever format you see on the web. And yeah, they teach observation and exaggeration. And the key to being able to draw observationally is that is a really powerful muscle to build, because then if you don't know how to draw something, you can look at something and then draw it. Which, I mean, sounds maybe that sounds really obvious, but I think a lot of people go through drawing. Say I were to come up to you and say, "Oh, draw me a horse." Maybe you would say, "Well, I don't know how to draw horses." But if you know how to draw observationally, if you know how to look at things and then transcribe it to paper, you can say, well, I don't know how to draw a horse, but I can find a photo of a horse and interpret that as I will. So those are all important things. And I was really lucky. I had amazing teachers in elementary school, in high school, who emphasized really strong fundamentals. I even had a teacher who had just stacks of Previews magazine as a reference and stuff, and he taught us all comic fundamentals. He was a really avid reader of comic books. So it's hard not to get inspired and feel supported by that sort of thing. And I understand not everybody encounters art teachers like that. It's not that, I've met a few people who went to high school, and their high school art teacher was like, well, it's important for you to express your feelings. And that's not unimportant. But my preference is that the fundamentals come first and the expression comes later. Once you can, it's much easier to know how to build your fundamentals and to know, become a craftsman first, and then use those tools to express yourself in the world and say what you want to say, tell people the things you want to tell them. But again, you can go back to whatever works for you. Is the best way to.
So what led you to comics? Since you studied animation, why is it that you're doing comics rather than animation?
Oh yeah, I read Garfield and Calvin and Hobbes religiously growing up. Calvin and Hobbes was just I don't know, it got its claws deep when I was young. There's the box set over there. And yeah, I can't say enough things. We could talk here for half an hour, for hours. Who wants to stay here for the rest of Sunday and talk about how great Calvin and Hobbes is? Right? Yeah, Calvin and Hobbes is fantastic. And some people look at this book and say to me, "What? So you did the coloring yourself, and you drew it? Did you write the story as well?" And they sound surprised. But to me, it seemed obvious you would do it yourself, because all of my favorite comics, Far Side and Calvin and Hobbes, were all drawn by one guy. You had Hellboy, all just somebody else colors Hellboy, but all my favorite comics were done by a single person. And then when I was in my teens, I was reading Image Comics in the late 90s or in the mid 90s. And I loved how like they were so dynamic and energetic, and they really like get that spot in your brain of like bright colors and flashy things and action, dynamism. But flip side of that is that all of the female characters were super boring.
Right.
And so I don't know. Comics are just something that was always sort of stuck in the back of my head. All my fellow animators, you know, have at least some sort of passing interest in comics. And so I don't know. This started off as just doodles and sketches, and then you know, going back to what I was saying earlier about small projects first, big projects later. I tried a little comic. It got a good reaction. Got a nomination. And so I kept doing it, and here we are, 2 months later.
Nice. So does anybody in the audience have any questions? Right away, here we go.
So when you're thinking of ideas and things, do you find a lot of things come up just in your daily life, like, hey, that just, I mean, how do you get those ideas and things? Like, or how do they, I mean, you might be thinking of a story or something, but there must be things in real life that you know, bring those ideas and things to you. Are there things you do?
That's a $1 million question, right?
Yeah. I mean, are there things you do that inspire you, like, or give you ideas in your book, like going on a trip somewhere? Or
it comes from all sorts of spaces. Like it could come from like sort of knowing the characters and you know, maybe like there's a scene in here that started off as just like, oh, this will be a funny joke to do here. And there are elements of that come from. Okay, so one of the other, I think this will all tie in related. One of the other nice things about doing the entire project, like I describe it as doing laps. That creative process of doing the whole thing a bunch of different times. One of the ways that helps is that it tells you what you are writing about. Like one of the tips I got for essay writing was you write your whole essay once. About what you think your essay is about, and then by the time you reach your end, you will have discovered what it's really about. Then you go back to the start and do it again. So a lot of it is you know, you think of one idea and then it pops off into another idea, and then maybe you'll step back and you look at 3 of them and you realize, oh, there's a connecting line between them. Maybe that becomes a story element. Maybe. Man, I don't know.
what about like your next door neighbor or somebody like that? Like,
Yeah.
I mean, like people in your life that
Absolutely.
may become a character or something they've done.
Right. I mean, in this story, there's a lot of the friendship between 2 main characters is sort of strained, and there's one point near the end where he finally just kind of cracks. Like she maybe pushes him a little too far. He cracks and he calls her on the horrible way that she'd been treating him. And somebody asked me if that was inspired from a real thing, and I couldn't think of a specific time, but I know that that's happened. I know a couple things. I know that if I were in that situation on either parts, that is how I would want it to go. I would want a true friend to come to me and say, hey, you're treating me badly. Stop it. As opposed to, because I've seen friendships between people, like maybe there's like a grudge, maybe somehow a grudge pops up or a little disagreement, and that just, it goes unspoken and it builds and builds and builds, and then the friendship just dissolves and sort of like fades into the mist. But if we have a true friendship, you don't want that to happen. You don't want it to go that way. And so I would, some of it is aspirational, like some of the elements in the story, like I would like some of this to be part of my life, you know, that sort of thing. But I don't know. Is that
Yeah,
sort of,
that's great. I just, was thinking that the ideas and things and that part of what you do and how that must just go through your minds all the time.
I don't know, it's tricky and nebulous, and I think it's different for everybody. But you get them out on paper, and then that makes room for more, and then eventually you just look at them all, and you're like, oh, I've got stuff for a story.
So this goes to a segue for, we had a question from the internet from Julie. Hi, Julie.
I do like.
So, and it's kind of a similar question of how did you get the idea for the book, which I might even sort of stretch out to where did Delilah herself come
What time is it?
from? It's about half an hour. So.
Yeah, I get a lot of, or I have a few questions like, why is it set in Turkey? That sort of thing. So I'm from Vancouver, BC, but I lived down here for a year. I lived in San Francisco for about a year early on, and a friend had a big box of his dad's kind of Horatio Hornblower books by C.S. Forster. And if you don't know Horatio Hornblower, it's nautical naval adventure set in the early 1800s. And I picked up one on a lark and started reading it, and before you know it, I had finished all of them, just chewed through all of them. And then that led to reading the Shark series. My dad had a whole bunch of those, and I just ended up taking in a whole bunch of these military adventure stories from the early 1800s. Really kind of loving the time. Deciding, I kind of want to give back to that genre and that time. And so I started researching the 1800s, and I thought, maybe it'll have something to do with art history, because that was a time when people started digging up old statues and stuff, and the English took the Parthenon marbles from Greece back to England, and it was all very in vogue, and I started researching that, and I don't know, one thing led to another, like one beautiful illustration led me to looking into like this area of the world, led to that area of the world, and then we were setting a book in Turkey. And Delilah came from one single illustration, which I wish I had now. One single illustration of Selim with his head in the chopping block, and her standing on top of the chopping block, fending off a whole bunch of marauding villains, basically. As just sort of I don't know, let's see what happens here, kind of thing. And again, it was inspired by that desire to introduce a lady character who was, had a sense of humor and didn't take everything to, wasn't glowering in every panel. Laughing stuff off. And I don't know, it just came from all those inspirations. It's hard to really pinpoint it. I mean, it also came from a spot of wanting to fill that little Indiana Jones shaped hole in your heart, which was left so empty by a certain movie which shall not go named. Like there's that quality in Indiana Jones films is captured in better episodes of DuckTales than it is in some other adventure movies. Whether that means that in other movies have been garbage or DuckTales is amazing, I don't quite imagine. But it's definitely one of those things. So
You got something?
yes.
Well, yeah, I just really like the setting. I love the setting of this film. It's just great. It's like, it just really works out.
That's very gratifying to hear. Thank you very much. I was listening to someone talk on a podcast, on a video game podcast. He was talking about another comic, and I don't remember the name, but he was saying that when you have a sense of the place, when you have a sense of the way the location is set up, first of all, it's nothing you get a lot in comics because nobody likes drawing backgrounds. But it's also when you have a sense of the place, you have a sense of the stakes involved. So your fights read better, your action reads better, and you can also draw. It just gives you, it gives you that feeling of sort of being there a little bit more if you put that little extra effort to the background.
So how much of this is hard research versus just sort of what we think of as that time? You know what I mean? Like because it seems to me that you could look at DuckTales and you can look at Indiana Jones and you can go, well, this is what the 1800s looks like, as opposed to going in and going, all right, I'm actually going to research like exactly what it looked like.
it's as much it is. I don't know where the sentence is going. I try to research. I try to get as much research as I can, and some of that involves actual like old illustrations from the time. At the time, in the mid 1800s, it was very popular for rich white people to travel from England through the Middle East and sort of report back on the exotic things that they discovered there. So everybody wanted like prints and drawings and paintings from the Middle East, and Orientalism was a big thing at the time. So it's not hard to find images of what these English travelers liked in Turkey and liked in the Middle East and the Holy Land as they crossed. And then a bunch of it is reading. A bunch of the research is reading, like old travelogues. People kept diaries, so it was easy to sort of follow along and get people's takes on what happened and what difficulties they had and that sort of thing. Like first person. And then you combine that with some sort of contemporary sources to try and get a feeling for the way the light and that sort of thing. Like, have you guys seen X-Files? Not the new X-Files, but like the old episodes. So there's a certain like quality to the light there that they get just because it's shot in Vancouver, right, which is different from the way the light sort of sits on LA, where a bunch of other stuff is shot. So if you can kind of find that, like weird details like that, and sort of interpret them and internalize them, it becomes a lot easier to create sort of convincing. Man, but one of the hardest things is just trying, like it's easy to find out big historical details, but it is so hard to find out things like what did a teacup look like in Turkey in the 1800s, or how do you pour a bath? Right. Like people don't record that really mundane, daily.
Well, because
stuff.
they just assume that
Yeah.
it's as read.
Yeah. So trying to decipher those details, like it's not something you can search for. It's something you just have to read a bunch of stuff and hope you stumble on.
Yeah. That's interesting.
It's very difficult. But,
do we have any more questions from?
Mine's more of a comment. Two comments. I'm a teacher librarian in the city, and I feel really appreciative right now that there's a lot of books about girls that boys will read.
oh, awesome.
And so I have an 8th grade boy that loves your book, and he was really disappointed when he looked online and he thought the second one was already out, and I said, no, you have to wait 4 months. And so, but and I see Miss Marvel, just like all the smile ones, and it's just, there's not a lot of books written that feature girls that boys will read, and I just think the more we have of those, the better. And I just feel thank you so much. And then the other one is my youngest sons, they like to read all the Spider-Man and Batman. And sometimes I don't want them to think that's what girls look like when they show the female super, or even the villain superheroes.
A boy going to a shop, like picking up Delilah Dirk and saying, "Oh, I would like to read this," but maybe his father or mother comes along and says, "Oh, but it's got a girl on the cover, so that's not really for you," which is heartbreaking. And there are a lot of people who ask questions like, "Oh, when are they going to kiss? And when are they going to enter into this romantic relationship?" And maybe they will, maybe they won't. But everything you need to know is on the page, and I think it's, can't we have just one story that's about, a guy and a girl who like just have a friendship? I mean, I had platonic female friends growing up, and so it seemed, I just assumed everybody did. So I don't know. I don't want that to be a weird thing. And it feels sometimes when you look on the internet, you look on Facebook and Twitter, it feels like that gender divide is growing more extreme, and I don't know. That doesn't feel healthy. So thank you for your comment. I appreciate it greatly.
So from the internet, if I can read the handwriting here. This is from Parker and Jack. Hi, Parker and Jack. So why did Alexandra create Delilah instead of growing up? Is that what that says?
Yes.
Okay, good.
That is okay. That is an interesting and perhaps philosophical, psychological question, maybe. So who has read this book here?
You all right?
Yes.
Okay. So I don't know if it was a spoiler or something. So Delilah Dirk's real name is Alexandra. And she adopts the Delilah Dirk name sort of the way Superman or Clark Kent adopts the Superman, or vice versa. No, Superman adopts the Clark Kent or something. Why did she do that instead of growing up? Well, I think, to our question answer, I think that says a lot about what you think about growing up. That's I don't know. That's a tricky question. I think the answer to that will have to stay on the page. And if you can find an answer in the book, and if you can find the answer in the next book or the previous book, that's where it'll be. I can't really say anything.
Okay, fair enough. How many more are there going to be? I mean, you've said there's going to be a third for sure.
There's definitely going to be a third one. It's going to be a real traditional tomb raiding, globe trotting, swashbuckling adventure. And then beyond that, that's going to between now and the time that book is finished, I'm sure there will be more ideas. Okay. So it will continue as long as it remains enjoyable, and as long as there's something to do with the characters. I don't want to put them in situations that aren't good for them, because then why not just come up with a different character and do that? So
that makes sense.
Are we gonna see more of Derek?
Are we going to see more of Merrick? That's right. You will have to wait and see.
That sounds like a yes. Usually when they say that, that's what it means.
One of the things that, so I mentioned the Shark series of books by Bernard Cornwell earlier. One of the things he does very well is manage to have the good guy win at the end without, say, killing the villain, right? Without sending the villain away. But it still feels satisfying. So that's like a writing challenge that I wanted to try out. And I hope it works. I hope that at the end you felt like even though Merrick escapes a little bit, even though he escapes, Delilah and Salim still, found happiness at the end. That sort of thing.
Yeah, and that's why I think that's my question.
Okay. Yeah. More to come.
Anything else from the room? Yeah.
Hi, I'm another teacher librarian.
Hello.
And, I just to piggyback on Callan's comment. I'm really appreciative of Delilah Dirk being a really strong female character. We actually bought one of your prints at DELILAH.
Oh.
My daughter, we put that up for her, and I just love that. The other thing is I really appreciate that this is a friendship between two different cultures, with Salim being, well, I haven't read this one, I read the first one.
Mm-hmm.
But I just appreciate the diverse friendship and friendship between that you don't often see, I don't think, in comic books or books, just between two characters from really different backgrounds. And that she is so strong in this, taking gender norms and kind of flipping them up a little bit. And I love it. So
Oh, well, I'm glad to hear that. Thank you. Thank
I love that Celine wants to open a t-shirt off
you. Simple pleasure, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So Julie, hi again, Julie, asks, why wasn't Leo the spy?
I am not sure I understand that question.
Yeah, I don't know that I do either, but I figured I'd ask since it was written down. All right, let's go to Parker and Jack again. Where did Salim come from? What was the idea behind giving Delilah a partner that discovers, discourages? What's that last word, Doug?
Her reputation.
Her reputation. How is that her reputation?
That was like
That's the
a
question.
no PL.
Yeah, no PL.
No reputation.
What was the first part again? Where does he?
Where does he come from? What was the idea behind giving Delilah a partner that?
He was intended to be sort of a square peg in a round hole, being sort of a misfit among Janissary soldiers. Sort of quiet, but maybe with like in the early pages of PD1, we sort of see that maybe he has an interest in adventure, or he would like to, kind of explore that. Maybe that's lurking in the back of his mind, but he's I think maybe too timid to engage it with it on his own. Why discouraging Delilah's reputation? I think what he does is, I just think he finds himself in an uncomfortable spot. I think his motivation is he feels he is so strongly driven by his motivation to fulfill his duty to her, especially in the first book. She saves his life, so he feels like the only thing I can do is somehow find a way to repay her for this debt that I now owe her, right? And I think from there he just follows this very strong sense of duty against any other his sense of the weight, his sense of honor and the weight he puts behind that is so great that it just overrides any other motivating factor, which is what I like about it.
Yeah.
And it's what I liked about reading Horatio Hornblower. He was a character who was just so hell-bent on doing what was right, doing the fulfilling his duty to the letter. That it seems a little mad, but it also seems a little, I don't know, I found it a little bit honorable, even though it leads into some very strange things.
Well, I also get the sense that he really admires her, and he really admires her strength and her stick-to-itiveness and her belief in doing the right thing, and I find that level of the friendship kind of the most touching part of it is that it's built on mutual respect.
Yeah, and she might be the first person he's met who wants to welcome him into that sort of active, like being active and engaging with life. Whereas everybody else is sort of like, well, you don't fit in here, so we're going to take it. So, guys, I don't know if that answered your question. But we do our best. Does anybody else have any questions?
Well, I just want to say I really like the chemistry between just like they really they seem like real people. The way that they kind of work together. Yeah.
Very nice to see. Sorry. They appreciate that.
So Keegan asks, how long did it take you to write the book?
That is a
And hi, Keegan.
Hi, Keegan. All told, the total time from passing that portfolio around, from the writing of the script to finishing the colored art, was about, for this book, second book, about 18 months, I think. But then a lot of that is hard to quantify because, like, I keep that notebook around.
Sure.
You know, who knows where the earliest, it's been a multi-year endeavor.
And was the second one easier, harder to do than the first one?
Much easier.
Yeah.
Much easier. I mean, this is the first time I tried to, or this is the first time I had done the whole graphic novel all at once. With the first book, there are portions of that have been their own individual little projects separately. And that's where I sort of learned, you know, the procedure that works for me, you know, the techniques, and sort of figured out what works for me and what I like on those, you know, like little 30-page chunks of those. And then this was just taking those things and extrapolating them over the course of the whole book. Because the first book is a product of 5 years. Well, just like off and on. Like, working animation, make money, and spend all your money making comics, and you work in animation, making money, and spend money. You know.
And is the third one going that much faster? Are you doing that one in like 12 months now?
You know what? The goal is to make it faster.
Yeah.
But we will have to see. It's still the writing process. As soon as I get back home, we're going to start doing thumbnails, get all the page compositions going, and then we're off to the races. Yeah.
I have a question about your animation school. Is that like a college?
Animation school.
Yeah, like an art school, and there's a specialty, or what is it?
Yeah, I went to a place called Capilano College in Vancouver, BC, which, for my money at the time, was one of the 2 best animation schools in Canada. Dedicated specifically toward training artists for work in 2D animation. 2-year program type thing. Portfolio-based admission, so you had to be able to, you know, demonstrate your drawing skills and submit that to get in. Yeah, between Capilano and Sheridan up in Canada, we have some fine schools out there. It's much more expensive now than it used to be.
Well,
Do you know a potential animator?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
How old is your potential animator?
Well, she's 13, but she's really drawing manga right now, and I'm just trying to sort of, I'm thinking about high schools and, you know, like where, like if she sort of just continues with art in general, or if she kind of starts specializing in stuff that she likes in high school.
I think if you're at the high school point and thinking about animation in the future, just, I don't know, I talk to the teachers about those fundamentals like proportion and perspective, composition, and observational drawing. And if she's spending her time on those things, she'll be very, very well placed coming out of high school. Yeah.
So I'd like to talk a little bit about your onomatopoeia. Do you guys know what onomatopoeia are? Do you know what can you define onomatopoeia for us?
They're clouds that you put in books.
Right, but they're specifically sounds that represent what the sound is. So like bang is an onomatopoeia. But you have some great onomatopoeia here. I think my favorite one is this one, kicked. I saw that and I started laughing for like 5 minutes, like in a good way, not like,
Yeah.
you have some very imaginative onomatopoeia here. Hoist, you know. Well, yeah, I just Is there any particular thinking behind that for you, or just are you entertaining yourself as you're doing it? Or?
Oh, very much the latter. Yeah, a lot of, I mean, it's a time. You can't, like, that's one of the things you can only, well, I guess you can do it. That's the, one of the great things about comics.
Yeah.
Is that tradition of crazy word balloons.
Yeah.
So, I don't know, yeah, just have a bit of fun with it. The one you pointed out was the kick thing. I will admit that looking at that again, that might be a cheat. That might be a cheat because I don't know if the drawing reads very well as her having kicked him.
Right.
So we just put that in there. All of a sudden, just because.
I see. All right. That makes sense. That makes sense.
So half of it's laziness and the other half is just having fun. Very good. Besides, we've all seen the usuals like Blammo,
Right.
Blam, Crash. So yeah, it's expand our vocabulary.
Yeah, no. I think it works very, very well.
I like one in this. Oh. There's one in the first book where Celine is sort of giving a stink eye to someone, and the onomatopoeia next to it is glare. And I don't know, it makes it clearer because you can't really, or you can get the expression reading, but it just puts that punctuation mark into the effect.
You know, and I even think that you know, it's like there's a sound to that too.
Yeah. It's such a strong glare that it takes off.
Exactly. All right. So I'm out of internet questions, and I think I've asked everything I have. Do you have any other comments or thoughts or statements, Mr. Co-host?
I love the art. Color, characters, great book.
Yeah. You're a triple threat. You're doing it all. So
That's the best. That is the best summary I have ever heard. Oh my god.
How about you, gang? Anybody else have any last statements or thoughts or comments? Yeah, in the back.
Real first question. In the first, when he makes the bet about the tea, does he get it right or does he get it wrong?
Oh,
I can't quite pick up whether.
You know, I was preparing that section for presentation and for like readings, and I was looking over that. And I'm like, it is not very clear whether he gets it right or wrong. So I will tell you, he does get it perfectly right, but so actually, two really interesting things about it. Okay, so about that one little sequence you just mentioned. For anybody who hasn't read the first book, at one point he is challenged by the master of a tea house or he offers to the master of the tea house. He says, "I will tell you exactly what's in this tea." And
oh, he doesn't want to pay it.
No, the tea master doesn't want to take his money.
Yeah.
So makes this challenge to him. And so Celine correctly names all of the ingredients, and there's like 20. But because the tea master does not want to take his money, because he knows Celine struggles, and this is actually a real thing, the way Janissary sold it at some point. Now I read this on Wikipedia, so that maybe the veracity is not super trustworthy. But they would pile up, I think, rice bowls or perhaps hay in a lump in the room, and then the soldier would have to fight for it, for real, as portrayed sort of in the book there. But Celine is very bad at this. The tea master knows this, so he doesn't want to take any of Celine's paltry change. But again, Celine is so driven by honor that he has to pay, regardless of the fact that maybe his last 2 cents. Okay. But also that tea recipe is a tea recipe that somebody made based off the first book when it first came out. She says at some point, "I only drink the blood of my enemies," and so a reader made a tea blend called "The Blood of My Enemies" out of those exact ingredients, arranged in order of proportion, I think.
I like it.
You know what? I've never had it. They seem to like it.
All right. Well, that was good. Thank you very much, Tony, for coming out. Thank you for this book. It really is. It's really good. I really appreciate it. And
Good. And thank you all for your questions.
Yeah. And if you guys want to wait for a couple minutes for us to just reset things, Tony, we're happy to sign your copies for you, yes?
You bet.
Very good. All right, thanks very much, and we will see you next month for next month's Kids Club meeting.